At 8.5 years clean, I'm in a nightclub one night, I'm gonna drink.
J-Mac.
The second I started to get a buzz, are we coming back here next weekend to do this? I'm already hooked.
This needs to stop.
This is what I come from, this is what I feel.
A talent toward the arts, but also you're fast track to doing hair.
I was in denial with being an addict for a little bit, and I just had this clear revelation. You are a full-blown addict, and this is not gonna end well.
There's a lot to unpack here.
Go to jail, go to rehab, or die. Those are your options. I could cut your hair, I could make you laugh, I could rob a store, and I could shoot.
Wow.
Came in at 23 with a drug problem, and I stay in recovery with a me problem. Relapse, it's the same thinking that said getting high was a good idea.
Mental gymnastics.
The guilt and shame kicks in, and that's fucking about as strong as drugs are.
Back in this chaos.
I work in treatment, and I'm an addict that's in recovery. Recovery is not only possible, but fucking so badass.
How do you balance that and stay on the trajectory of living in recovery?
Welcome to Investing in Sobriety, the podcast where we explore life, recovery, and the process of rebuilding from substance and process-based addictions. This is a space for real conversations, real experiences, and the transformations that happen when we truly invest in ourselves.
Hey, welcome to Investing in Sobriety. My name is Derek Benson. I hope that you are making it a great day. Today, I have the opportunity and the privilege to be sitting here with J-Mac. J-Mac is an individual that I crossed paths with over the past 6 months. He has a very interesting story. At one point, he was sober about 9 years. He relapsed, found his way back into recovery. Yes, there's mess in his history and while he was in recovery, but we're going to focus a little more on the message of recovery and kind of what the design of life has looked like throughout his childhood, early years, formidable years, but really the recovery time. J-Mac, thank you for joining me, brother.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure getting to know you through the phone, and now to finally, be in person and to do this.
Absolutely. I think the way that we connected was pretty common nowadays, a little unconventional for me, like the whole social media aspect. But then when we hopped on the phone, we just talked. I felt like we were doing a podcast on the first call that we had. So super genuine, super organic, very authentic. In fact, a lot of your story resonates with me because while they weren't the same experiences, we had very similar upbringings. You had talked a little about the chaos and the fear and kind of what that looked like, but you had said something that really stuck out to me. And you talked about people in recovery bragging backwards. Can you kind of break that down for us?
Sure. It's something I've been saying for quite a few years, and I would notice that you'd have people in recovery, and yes, that is an accomplishment as far as gaining sobriety or recovery, whatever way you want to view it. But I was noticing that a lot of people were touching mainly on older stories or almost war stories or stuff that they felt was important that they did, but it was years ago, whether it was, jail, selling drugs, the street life, just all that stuff. And I come from all that stuff too, but I just choose not to really talk about the chaos as much. And my message is more, what are you doing currently? Where are you trying to go in life? What are your goals? And are you accomplishing those goals? Because the best part for my personal experience is on the journey of trying to do all these life goals, I became the man that I wish that I had when I was younger, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. You had talked a little about your childhood on other podcasts, and you said it was very fear-based. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what that fear was? What was going on inside of you throughout your childhood?
So the easiest way to break it down and what makes the most sense now, one of my philosophies in recovery is no matter how much work I do internally, I'm not able to change my childhood, but I've definitely been able to view it from a clearer perspective and almost like feel bad for my parents, if that makes sense. My mom was 16. My dad was also a teenager. So I was more raised by my grandmother and that side of the family. So I've seen a lot of chaos, a lot of alcoholism, addiction, domestic violence, and fear is a word. No matter what platform I talk about, fear is, I say, the one word that sums up my childhood. And really looking back, my parents were so young and didn't know what they were doing. So the stuff that I was around, I just felt like a scared little boy and I had no way out or no one to turn to. and I had freedom at a pretty young age to hang down the park late night and things like that. So it was fear, and it was anxiety, and it was some of the words that have made sense as I've gotten older. With, we were just talking about this before we were shooting, the anxiety piece and stressing over the future. I was afraid to go to school. I was the new kid a lot of the time because my mom would get evicted from different apartments. So now we're moving to a new city or a new school district, and you just no stability. So I didn't have the same group of friends growing up, and looking back, I'm the opposite now as a parent. It's like structure and guidance and love is what I give my child. And I didn't have that when I was a kid, at least in the house that I lived in.
Interesting. And it makes complete sense. And I understand because it resonates deeply with me. That was my lived experience. I know no other way, right? I do know, and I'm not going to try to fast forward a lot, but I know that you're heavily involved with Rise Above. You're deeply involved in the recovery community now. What were you missing in your childhood that you have now?
I believe it was connection. I always felt out of place. I remember being roughly 6, 7 years old, figuring out that I was poor because when I went to the store, I had food stamps that I had got from my mother, and my money looked different than the other kids. Food stamps back in the day, nowadays EBT, right? So it's a card, but back in the day, it looked like Monopoly money. And a lot of the kids when I was younger in the different areas that we lived in seemed to have both parents, or I should say most kids had both parents. I always had my mom and then her current boyfriend, or just my mom, and I always lacked connection and lacked feeling that I was accepted, because when you're the new kid, my story is summed up like this. No matter what school I went to, what city, district, or age, I got in easy with the girls because they're like, oh, that's the new kid, and they liked me. And then I'd had to fight kids that were 3 times the size of me. I was a very timid, small, meek type of kid when I was younger. All the working out and getting bigger, that stuff derived from my childhood, honestly, to want to be bigger and badder and just protect yourself. But as a kid, I lacked connection. And I would never think that where I personally found connection was when I started to discover, the halls or the church basements, however you want to word it, with recovery. And I would never think that because I was very against religion in churches, but most meetings that I went to were in church basements. That's where I've honestly found some of the most solid people in my life that I still have even to this day.
Oftentimes when I speak with someone, I try to put myself in that situation, like visualize it. And I'm interested in the feeling that the recovery community gave you that maybe you probably felt at your grandmother's house compared to the rest of your childhood. You had discussed a little about the history of your family dynamic, but really that your grandmother provided a safe space. Did you feel that same or a similar feeling when you found the recovery space? What parallels could you draw about feelings between your childhood and when you found a recovery community?
Well, so my grandmother, I would mainly spend a lot of time on the weekends with my grandma. My father's side is the Italian side of the family.
Okay.
That was the tight-knit, a lot of the marriages on that side, they're still together to this day. And Sunday dinners, my grandmother was the glue that kept the family together. So I was there on the weekends, and I'd spend chunks of summers there. And it was just an unconditional love. Like, I'll give you an example. One of my earliest memories that I remember is, I was young and I knew Santa didn't exist. And my grandmother would buy me whatever I want leading up to Christmas and say, just act surprised when we do the unwrapping. And I always remember that because I was like, oh, I want this, little things like that. And, would cook for me things I want. And just, I felt safe. I did not feel that in the house that I actually lived in growing up. It was very chaotic. My mom is stuck in the past, and that's her own stuff. But that's why, what I mean when I say when you dissect your past, being in recovery and as you evolve as a man, my childhood makes more sense. And I can see it for what it was. I had more unconditional love with my grandmother and chaos and anxiety and fear in the house that I lived in. And then to fast forward to, it's not that I felt unconditional love in the halls or in recovery and stuff like that. With some people I did, in my experience. My recovery looks a lot like this. unapologetically own who you are, what you went through, you're going to connect with someone. It's most likely not going to be everybody. And that just goes for any topic in life. Not everyone agrees on everything, but it's the people you do find. And when I started unapologetically just being me, and this is what I come from, this is what I feel, and say stuff that you might have been scared to say, that's where I met some of my best friends, because we connected. So you did have like an unconditional love where it's like, I see you for who you are. And the reason why I wasn't willing to own that when I was younger is I felt like if you get too vulnerable, people can use that to hurt you, which actually is true. It's just in recovery. Every relationship's a gamble, I feel like, in life.
It is.
Every relationship is a gamble.
It's a gamble with your emotions. It's a gamble with your time, your energy, right? We're as far as I know, we have a fixed amount of time here, right? And with that being said, we got to really determine how we want to invest that, So it's, you're rolling the dice. There's no question. Leading up to recovery, you pretty much during your formidable years, you catch yourself having artistic tendencies. You talked about your graffiti work. I always found it interesting because you say a writer, right? You say a graffiti writer, not a graffiti artist. When you were coming to this point during, I would say, really high school, you notice a talent toward the arts, but also you're fast tracked to doing heroin. What does life look like for you? What is going through your head? Where are you at really when you're in high school and learning these creative expressions, but at the same time actively seeking heroin?
To paint a picture vividly, my artwork it's always coincided with exactly how I'm living. Meaning when I say graffiti writer, I wasn't doing murals or portraits or anything wowing in the sense of like, wow, that's a fascinating piece of art. It was when you took the train into Boston, most lines, mainly the orange line is the line that I grew up on. From there all the way to North Station, you could see what I was painting, and we were doing stuff that was big and legible for attention. So my first drug of choice before I ever even picked up any substance was adrenaline. So when I say graffiti writer, it's because we wrote everywhere, and we wrote to have a name, and we wrote to create a rep because I didn't have a voice in my house, or at least I felt that way. So I created basically this alter ego on the street. A graffiti writer to me is almost like a superhero, right? And your power is to kind of connect with others, and there's a small circle of people that are interested in seeing that. So it started to be this just this way to maneuver around, and it went hand in hand with drugs, and that escalated, and the way that I was painting escalated. I've painted spots where if I fell, I'm going to die. Not just on a billboard, but above the billboard. I've painted subway systems. I've painted the freight lines. We've painted rooftops. I've painted moving trains that pull up to the station and you just get in a cutty spot. And all this stuff was going hand in hand with the drug use. And that went on for years. And I never once was really even interested in being an artist. I always thought that was actually being a sellout, which just shows kind of closed-minded thinking back then in my early 20s. And the same brain that thought doing heroin was a good idea was the same thinking that said, like, I'm not going to be an artist, that's selling out. And really, what is that? I mean, you can end up creating a living off of passion. That doesn't sound like selling out to me. That sounds like more people should go that way, if you ask me.
Yes. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you adopted this mindset of me versus them or us versus them. As a byproduct of that, you also have your own community, but you're also expressing yourself creatively. And let's just say when you're shooting dope and you're living that life, fast lane, drinking hard, like you were getting after it. And you also aren't in the position to maximize your creative talent to like full capacity. So it like in a way kind of holds you back. Where were you when you first thought that I need to stop drinking and doing dope? And like, what was your thought about that?
That's actually a very interesting question. You asking that question just made this pop into my head. I was in denial with being an addict for a little bit, like my early 20s. And I remember being 21, about to turn 22. And for whatever reason, that morning when I got up to go through that rat race, right? Because my active addiction led to me boosting daily. The way that we get money escalates, the drugs we're doing escalates, how we're doing the drugs escalate, and what we are doing, why we are on the drugs escalate. And I had woken up one morning and I just had this clear revelation. You are a full-blown addict and this is not going to end well. Now, I do believe that that was a moment of clarity, even in active addiction, but I still had to go and do what I got to do that morning to get right. But it is definitely the beginning of knowing the subconscious mind was not going to allow me to enjoy getting high too much longer because it always is interfering. I've always known right from wrong. I think most humans, when I ask this question a lot, especially with running group or speaking or traveling, whatever platform, and I ask a crowd, do you know right from wrong? And most people say yes. And I say, do you realize you've known right from wrong your whole life? And they say yes. I said, I just like to lean into doing the wrong thing when I was younger. And then in active addiction, it's tough to stay doing the right thing, right? And that mindset started having me lean towards like, I don't know, almost like looking for like, how would this end? Because if you don't die, the track record shows people either go to jail, go to rehab, or die. Those are your options, right? That's something I agree with whatever fellowship, right? They say jails, institutions of death. They also don't come in that order. And I continued getting high for a few more years after that, until I originally found myself in detox at 23 years old for the first time. I wanted to stop using, but didn't know exactly how, and I didn't buy into the whole recovery. I honestly didn't. I didn't buy into people trying to speak to me inspirationally, and I'd judge them if they didn't do the same drugs, if they didn't have tattoos, if they weren't a street kid. I just use. It's the only disease on the planet that I see that compares with others and says we're not as bad or we're worse than others. Where I didn't see my grandmother who died of cancer compare that to another family member that died of different cancer and say she's worse. Your life ended both off the same disease, and I just wasn't buying into it when I first found my way into getting some help. So the help didn't work, but a seed was planted.
It's interesting because you said you had this thought initially at about 21. At this point, you recognize that you're a heroin addict, you're an alcoholic, you're using other substances as well. But it was 2 years before you end up in a detox, roughly.
Yep.
That was my experience. I can vividly remember having those thoughts 4 years before I ended up getting arrested. And there were actually points where I was going to pick up where I was like crying, wanting to stop. But I fell victim of that cycle of every night before I went to bed saying tomorrow's going to be different. And it was never any fucking different. It's the same story over and over. And so when you're 23, you've recognized that you're ramming your head into the door. What got you into this first detox?
Family intervened. There was a small intervention. And I remember it being this like little rat race and just, I almost got sent to like the Betty Ford Clinic because now this is where my father's side of the family, my cousin, my aunt, they were very loving and caring and nervous and scared. And I remember seeing them cry, which that made me feel like shit. Because when they figured out that I was a heroin addict, that's like the top tier, In most people's eyes, that's like, holy shit,
right.
He's going to die. Which looking back was the case because, I've overdosed. I've had to save people, just that lifestyle. And I ultimately ended up in detox for the first time. And I was actually thinking this on the drive down here, how comical it was. I might not have known recovery was possible or was battling with whether I wanted it or not. I just knew I wanted to stop shooting heroin. And they put me in a room and these two kids were just like kind of going back to the bragging backwards. Like, I'm in detox. I just want to stop doing drugs. I really did. And they were talking about leaving with a combination of fucking probably $60 between the two guys. Dead of winter or approaching winter. It was end of November. And I always remember this. The first 2 days you could stay in bed and just chill on your meds and just relax. But these commitments came in, or they'd run groups. I noticed that I started to be a little bit interested in what people were saying when they came. And I remember the dude that did my intake after detox, he caught my eye because he was covered on tattoos, and he just came off like like another street kid that just changed his life around, that worked and was doing my intake. So I was interested in what he had to say and what the commitments had to say. And then I went to Holding after that, which held 80 guys at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Tewksbury Cab in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. And my first day there, I'm kicking the methadone, right? Get the nice 5-day taper. First couple days, I joke with people. I was smoking cigarettes left and right. I'm having a good old time. Oh, getting clean's easy. Those last few days when you got nothing, sucked. So they tell me, oh, you're going to make your way over to Tewksbury. It's in the same grounds. A staff member walks you up. And a kid from my neighborhood, where I grew up in Malden, his little brother was there. So he kind of showed me around. That's the first place when I share like the positive switch with graffiti writer to artist, is that when I went there, I met a guy named Louie Diaz, who was kind of, without planning it, he came off as one of my first like mentors, because anything that dude said, I really like believed him. And he used to run groups and things like that. And he had seen one day, me and a few guys were going over a photo album I have. One of the many photo albums where I have graffiti documented from Boston and Connecticut, New York, and a bunch of it's the stuff that me and my crew did. And he come over and said, you did this all with spray paint? And I was like, yeah. He's like, damn, man, you should really be doing something with this, like something bigger, murals. I remember it planted a little bit of a seed. I'm not saying from that moment I wanted to be like painting flowers and shit, but I definitely, my mind started to shift that maybe there is more out there for me, right? Because there's got to be more out there for me than doing drugs. So what does that look like? Everything's foreign at that point. How you think, how you feel, how you interact with people, how you even date someone, how you'd even have sex. Anything is going to be foreign, stripped of drugs and alcohol. So at 23 years old, I joke and say, this is what I knew how to do at 23. I could cut your hair, because I had been a barber. I could make you laugh. I could rob a store, and I could shoot heroin. So I really gravitated towards the cutting hair and making people laugh. And obviously the artwork part, the creative part, I should say. But cutting people's hair and making people laugh is literally something I still do to this day, and I'm 46, and that story is from when I was 23. A haircut and a laugh go a long way. And that's where I built my foundation, or I started to build the foundation of my recovery, being off of, I'm going to lean into my skill sets. Because I believe repetition's the mother of all skill. One of my best friends, Chris, shout out to him. I know he didn't invent that, but he uses it a lot when he speaks, and I use it too because it's just a formula of my life, is that I believe I was born with the gift to create, but I wanted to create, and that's where I started leaning into that.
And this was during the conversation with the clinician?
No, he's not a clinician. It was Louie Diaz. He was the assistant director at the time, and he started saying, you should be doing more with the artwork. I'm not talking about pretty street art murals. It was literally like tags and the throws of trucks and subway system and, abandoned buildings and all like the grimy graffiti, but it was still impressive to him and most people because it was done with spray paint.
At this point, where are you with your recovery? Where are you with your art after he says this to you? What did life look like moving forward after that conversation?
I started trying to apply, just putting effort in. Like, for instance, he wanted me to do some artwork in the place. The catch was I couldn't use spray paint.
Okay.
Now, the catch is being a graffiti writer or artist, however you want to view it, not a medium, is spray paint. It's an indoor facility. So he's like, if I'm going to have you do artwork, I can't have you use spray paint, so you'd have to come up with some paint markers or paintbrushes. And I remember being like a little hesitant with it. The thing was, I got called to go to my first halfway house. I was only there for 3 weeks, and I got called to my first halfway house. Went to that halfway house, and very soon after that, even though I was clean, I started getting back into actual graffiti. So now I'm out on the street, right? I have stipulations. I have meetings I got to go to. I got a curfew. I have things like that. But a halfway house is 6 months, at least the way that format in Boston and Massachusetts, it's 6 months you're there.
Okay.
So I started painting, and I completed that halfway house. You know, I did go with structure, but something I always share is that my first available overnight that I had in that halfway house, I drank. And one of the worst things happened that could happen. I got away with it. Now, I got away with it, meaning staff didn't find out, but I knew. And what that ultimately deterred me from was the connection that I had built in the people that I had met in recovery at that point. So It makes a lot of sense now. That's how I started stepping away from the people that were there to help me and that had some time. And you get away with using, but we don't, because we know. Right now, my conscience was eating at me. And I actually ended up catching a case while in sober living at that same halfway house when I graduated. If you're a good client, which I was, I helped other guys in the 6 months I was there. They gave me a bed in sober living. And it was Halloween 2004 at this point. I was in sober living. And I caught a case. And my mother found out about it because I made the paper. And we got chased by Malden police. And if I wasn't on drugs, I would have got away because I was hiding in a great spot. But on cocaine, it's tough to hide in a secluded spot.
And
So
you
I
never
outed
get
myself.
away. You never get away.
Well, we could do a whole podcast on my chase stories. If we're being honest, it's kind of bragging backwards, but neither here nor there. There's stories where being a graffiti writer for as long as I was, I have lots of stories of getting away.
Yeah.
This one particular one is not one of those. Anyways, caught a case, spent the night in jail, see the judge. They released me on my own personal recognizance. Now I got another case. Then I caught another case for driving with a suspended license, boosting, and this spiraled out of control. Now me and my girlfriend at the time were like Bonnie and Clyde. We're robbing and stealing. We're getting high. Her family takes her away. They have an intervention. They send her to rehab. So for 3-4 days, I'm out on my own. And I ultimately went back to rehab at 25 years old with a couple cases out of 2 different cities. But an understanding of how recovery works. Because I don't know about you. I have an idea that you're going to relate with this. I know others do. After a relapse in my history, when I come back and take a look at it and I'm willing to be accountable and hold myself accountable, a lot of stuff makes sense. We can't connect the dots going forward, but you can backwards, right? If we look at our life right now to this day, past, a lot of stuff makes sense, but we can't do that going forward. If anything, it brings on anxiety and stress. I looked at where I went wrong. I was kind of gun-ho now at this point, and I ended up back in that same facility, the same detox, some of the same staff. And now when I went to that place in Tewksbury, the guy, Louie, who was there to help me the first time, was now running the whole place. And he put me to work. He said, now that you're here, I'm going to have you paint. Because I specifically wanted to go to a halfway house in East Boston. I was 25 years old. It's dead of winter. And this is a perfect example. Before, I wanted to get to the quickest halfway house. Which halfway house can I pick that I'm out in 3 weeks, hit the street, out of meat, and doing my thing? This one, I wanted to go to East Boston Rehab. They said that's a 4-month wait. So your options were to work out, play ping pong, play cards, read, or there was actually a small barbershop set up. And I just locked in. I started cutting people's hair. I started drawing cards for people. I started doing a lot of stuff, and I didn't care if you had cigarettes or soups, or I didn't care about the trading like that. I honestly started doing stuff for free because I got a little glimpse of when you do stuff just for the sake of wanting to help someone out, it felt a lot different. And Louie had me paint experience, strength, and hope, which I had heard before. Many addicts have heard that. But now these words meant something to me. So experience, strength, and hope, I was asked to paint on these benches, but I could only use paintbrushes and paint markers. He said, I also can't pay you, so I feel bad, just asking you to paint this. What would you, want for this? I said, Louie, you know how everyone has to get up at 6 a.m., especially if your room's on chow hall, right? Because if you're on chow hall, the whole room got to get up. 6-man rooms, right? It's like pre-release.
Yeah.
You get a shower. There's 6 to 8 guys in the shower. 6-man rooms, east and west wing, groups, big chow hall, right? And I said, you know how everyone got to get up at 6? He said, yeah. I go, I don't want to get up at 6. He said, say less. And that's how I went on to paint experience, strength, and hope. And I'd stay up till all hours of the night, just putting my all into drawing and painting. And the difference was I didn't have drugs and alcohol, which was so familiar with that in my active addiction that's how I do the crazy spots, because you're motivated to create and do those things. And when I was stripped of that in recovery, that was one of my battles with being creative. I've always said, I thought I was more creative on drugs. And that can be true to a certain extent, but my recovery proves otherwise. You might be highly motivated on drugs to go do these things, right? People create some of the best music in the world we've ever heard has been done on drugs and alcohol. Some of the best art. And I really invested a lot into experience, strength, and hope. And one of the cool things with giving back is for the next year or two after I left that program and went to East Boston Rehab, is I used to come back and speak to that same facility and sit on the benches that said experience, strength, and hope. And that's what I would speak to existence, is my experience, strength, and hope. And that's the beautiful part about recovery, because if you really lock in on those three words, that's how you deliver a great message, at least in my opinion. Because you can't fuck up the truth so long as you lean into what your experience is, what your strength is, and what you hope for others to gather from it. It's not up for debate. Like when you tell your story, as long as you tell it wholeheartedly and like what your experience is, it's not a matter of combating with people. You just want to spread the message out there for people. And, that was one of my first beginnings of truly understanding the meaning of those words, is he had me paint them.
So you're 25. You're painting. Very different from what you've done in the past. How far along are you in your all-in journey with recovery?
At 25?
Yeah.
Very locked in. I went to that halfway house. I was familiar name-wise with some of the staff, so I already felt welcome. Going into this halfway house at the time, I had a close friend at the time, and his uncle was there. That's who ended up being my case manager. And another friend of mine from the neighborhood, his kid's mother worked there as staff too. And I knew that they were in recovery. So now I'm at a halfway house where all of the staff is also in recovery. I had enough of a taste of it that now I wanted to be back at meetings. And I just really locked in. I actually started partaking in the softball that was going on and getting on that team, doing sports, getting more serious with working out and taking care of myself, really leaning into the art. I was still doing graffiti. That's a huge part of my story. I was illegally still painting and doing.
I think that's the important thing that we need to touch on. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're painting illegally. Like, it's not, you're going and tagging certain places, you're painting without permission. You get arrested, you get tickets, you have court dates. Like, you can get hemmed up. I've met one graffiti artist. He literally lived his entire life in and out of court, but the manifestation of that is happening as you're finding recovery, which I find super interesting.
Remember I told you it was like a superhero? So I'm 25 years old, which is still rather young. I'm understanding how recovery works. I'm getting locked in with how to stay clean. But the behaviors and things like that were increasing. And I'm also now starting
What behaviors? Don't breeze over them. I'm sorry. Like, for me, being in recovery, I'm like, the behaviors, like, that's, you can just slide that in. Like, what?
Well, meaning the illegal, like, I'm painting. I'm waiting for my girlfriend to go to sleep in the relationship. The same relationship, actually, I should touch on. We were together in active addiction, but we ended up being clean together in that relationship. A majority of that relationship, we were clean and in recovery. But she didn't like that I was painting like that. But she also knew it was something I wasn't going to change. The positive to that, though, is I started now getting invited to different events to paint. I was invited to Canada to a place. It's an event called Under Pressure. They have it on St. Catherine Street. I started making it into magazines that, as I was growing up, I admired, because we're still in, we're talking 2005, 2006. Magazines, was still, the graffiti magazines, they hadn't transitioned yet over into all these Instagram, TikTok, right? Everything almost nowadays digital. But I started making it into magazines. So there started to be some positive stuff from this. And one of the other things that I was honing in on was my brand, which is Streetsmart. So one of the things my mom always said when I was growing up was, my son's not book smart, he's street smart. I remember getting kicked out of a school and her saying that to either a teacher or a principal. And just the street smart term had stuck with me because it made sense. Down the park, the projects, the street, no guidance to survive. You had to have some street smarts. But I wanted to also turn that into a positive thing. And so at this time I get out, I might be painting illegally, but I'm leaning more into like creating t-shirts and creating merch. At 26 years old, about to turn 27, I was dropping new hoodies and able to bring them up to Jim in 94.5, the radio station in Boston, because a kid that I went to high school with, shout out to Maverick and Master Millions and Roy Barboza, they were all DJs. So that's who I would bring the hoodies to first. And they used to shout me out on the radio.
Okay.
You know,
And are you sober? Are you in recovery?
Yes.
Or okay.
Fully in recovery.
Okay.
Fully going to 12-step fellowship, fully, doing all this stuff. What I mean by all this stuff is all the stuff I thought was either corny or didn't work or worked for you, but not for me. Now I was that guy. Because it does work, and it works whether people think so or not. It just doesn't work for you if you don't think so. Like that's just
right.
Right. So, but I'm going up there, I'm giving out merch and I'm doing a lot of positive stuff, but I am still painting illegally. And that went on for years.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't. But I vividly remember listening to a podcast where you said that graffiti gave you the feeling that I was here. And it almost sounds like when you found recovery, when you painted that bench and started moving in this trajectory, maybe you had a similar feeling as though I am here, like you belong. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I don't think it's definitely not putting words in my mouth. I appreciate you not wanting to come off that way, but I 100% started learning how to lean into who I truly was meant to be. What I mean by that, and try to help other people figure that out, is that you got to dissect what it is that you really are interested in. What gives you purpose? I was born with the sense of always wanting to create. And we can play the game of, yes, maybe if I could lean into art when I was younger, that maybe I would do, but I'm not with the maybe. What I am is what definitely. And when I definitely lean into what it is that I'm into, right? Because there is a sense of confidence that will come over. Most addicts and alcoholics are deeply insecure, whether they want to admit it or not. And I'll just keep it on me. My experience is that I was deeply insecure, didn't feel love, didn't feel acceptance, all these things. And when you start to really understand who you are and what makes you tick, and that you are good at some things, but most importantly, that when you are so deeply passionate about creating, when you give it your all, that affects the world. And I'm also passionate about helping people now, but that came over time. I had to really pour into my cup. There's three things I'm deeply passionate about. It's one, being a recovering addict and helping people, because I once thought it wasn't possible and felt hopeless. Second is being an artist, because I've been working at it my whole life. And the third is being a dad, because I feel like I didn't have one growing up, even though he was with me periodically. I didn't have a loving and caring dad. So part of my recovery has me motivated. And you could call it selfish, I guess, but I act in a way that I wish that I had when I was younger. So it's about giving love and care and empathy and also guidance and being strong when you need to be, and those are the things. And I just, when you understand how an addict's brain thinks by dissecting your own, it's a little bit easier to start helping others.
What does J-Mac's life look like when he's not living in that space?
Not creating. If I'm not leaning into creating, I can start to get a little overwhelmed with what's coming my way. There's a lot of, if we're talking about nowadays, I have a lot of responsibility, right? I have a lot of things to take care of. I have a lot of clients to look after, to run group. I have all these things. And you take it back to the basics. If you're not doing the things that make you whole or that are positive or basic structured things that have shown to work over time, I can immediately go back to just being this out-of-mind human that's freaking out about the future, right? And I think most people relate with this. In your adult life, most adults have some things they got to take care of, but you mix being an addict with that, right? Because to me, that's the thinking. I say it all the time. I came in at 23 with a drug problem, and I stay in recovery with a me problem. It's not the substances did what they were supposed to do. That's just the bottom line. Whatever one I did, your favorites or the ones that scare you, the one that make you over, they all did what they were supposed to do. But recovery does the same thing, man. It just teaches you thinking. And the truth is, I feel like I'm wasting my own time if I do not lean into what I'm good at and what I like to do, I just feel like I'm wasting time sometimes. So sometimes that in limbo of my next project is actually a battle for me.
No, it's difficult because I heard someone say this once and it resonates. It's the easiest way for me to say it. If you have 1 foot in tomorrow and 1 foot in yesterday, you're pissing on today, right? You found this community. You've found the opportunity for service, involvement to enrich yourself, like mentally, physically, spiritually, like you're doing it. But you relapse after 9 years. Can you kind of walk us through your recovery journey? You mentioned the first couple of years, but can you walk us through your recovery journey up to that 9 years?
Yeah, to sum it up, I was heavily involved. It was at 8.5, I had relapsed, 8.5 years. But probably at 7.5, that last year, the first chunk of it, it's all the stereotypical things that work. And what I mean by that is most people that are going to share that they've had a chunk of time were probably involved with helping others, hanging around the right people, some type of fellowship, AA, NA, whatever, any of that route. That worked for me. It helped me change my thinking. I personally think the steps are a blueprint for a new way of living. And let's be real, it just is just how I feel. You don't even have to be an addict or alcoholic to look at stuff like that. It's just internal dialogue that you're going to go over. We know all the answers. The tricky part is you have to go over it with someone else that's going to hold you accountable or that you're releasing your shit to.
Right.
Because we try to dissect our own shit. You're going to manipulate yourself. It's the same thinking that said getting high was a good idea.
Right. The mental gymnastics.
Yeah, so you go over it with someone else. All that stuff worked. And then it just started getting very unspiritual, to touch on the, not to pass by with saying behaviors, but what they really were was, just being in a relationship that should have been over, but didn't want to fully pull the plug. So I'm messing around on the side. In and out of the strip club left and right, but in recovery, right? So that just comes with a chaotic lifestyle. Nothing about being in there was tempting me to drink at the time, but it was just chaotic. You're around a lot of drama, some fights, bullshit like that. And ultimately, at 8.5 years clean, I'm in a nightclub one night, and I remember making the conscious decision earlier that night, like I'm going to drink, which is scary. Didn't tell anyone. And the scary thing is even after 8.5 years, that first drink, which was a vodka and Red Bull, the second I started to get a buzz, I immediately was more concerned with, are we coming back here next weekend to do this? Now, I'm in the moment. Well, no, I'm not. I'm actually projecting to next week. I'm in the club, I should say. Supposed to be having a good time. And I wasn't with anyone in recovery. However, the couple guys I was with were pissed that I drank. The reason why I throw that part out is, you can have friends that aren't in recovery that are not going to be accepting with you relapsing. So they didn't give me the reaction I wanted. They were actually pissed, like, dude, you're drinking? And I remember the look on one of their faces when I said, like, are we coming back next weekend? Because I was dead ass, like, I'm already hooked. And he just kind of shook his head. And it got ugly fairly quick after that. It didn't stick with just drinking. It just escalated. And, next thing you know, a couple weeks later, we're getting chased by the cops. I'm getting into fights. We're getting away from getting chased by the cops. So that brings on ego. In my experience, in my opinion, right? It does. It brought on ego. And it was also showing me that I'm teeter-totter in that line again. And it didn't matter that I had 8.5 years clean. I mean, the fucking chase happened down Revere Beach. There's tons of people watching. It went from car to foot, get away, to be like, oh, I'm back. And that escalated. And it went to perks. It went to this. It went, and then that was another couple in and out for a few years of in and out. And that's what they're having all that time, because now the guilt and shame kicks in, and that's fucking about as strong as drugs are. Guilt and shame for an addict that's had time, at least if I'm speaking on my story, because I know it's going to resonate with people, but I try to really hone in on it being my story, so it's for someone else to relate to. I'm not trying to judge anyone, but the guilt and shame was very powerful and kept me out there, because it's tough to come back with your tail between your legs.
I haven't had that experience. I've talked with a lot of guys that relapse. In fact, being a member of a 12-step community for a significant part of my recovery, well, almost all of my recovery, I would say that I'm a member. Whether my meeting attendance is frequent or not, like my circle of influence is 12-step oriented. I do think sponsorship is kind of the pinnacle of recovery for me. That could be sponsorship in a 12-step community or not, but actually sitting down across from another human, divulging the information that you're keeping inside of you and having a transparent conversation, to me, is the most enriching thing in recovery. I think that because I've had conversations with men who are married and they love their wife, the sexual energy is good, but they catch themselves watching a lot of porn, or they catch themselves lusting after other women, and they don't talk about it, right? They don't talk about it, right? And things like that can manifest into consequential behaviors, right? And then they don't want to face the consequence, right? Rather than facing that with another human being and kind of dissecting that, diving a little deeper, whether you call it sponsorship, whether you call it an accountability group, whatever you want to call it, I just think there's something deeply enriching. When you catch yourself back in this chaos, are you actively going to meetings, or kind of what's the design? Are you showing up to meetings, or still talking to your old sponsor? Do people cut you off? What's the design of life after you relapse and you're trying to figure things out?
So it wasn't a complete 3 years away. So there's a couple little glimpses of coming back. One was, and I'll just throw it out there for what it was, randomly crossed paths in life with a female. The way that we met, we crossed paths at a concert like 4 or 5 different times, but without actually going through it, going up to her.
What do you mean? You just saw her and you knew her?
So we crossed paths at the greatest spots right near the garden. We cross paths. I see her. She sees me. I don't want to be the guy that goes up right away, even though I'm telling you I was interested at the time, but I'm playing hard to get. Go in the bar. Like I said, I'm in active addiction. I'm drinking. At the time, I had gotten us seats, me and my boy, like one of the suites at the garden. So you have your own bathroom, little kitchen area, whatever. We're sitting there. A Jay-Z concert starts. That same girl and her friend walk by.
Okay.
See him again. God knows 30-something thousand people. What are the chances they're sitting near us? Cross paths, see her, kind of smile. That happens 2 more times. That turns into concert over, on the street, going to my car with my boy. It's raining out. We see her one last time again. My boy's like, "You're not going to talk to this girl?" Walks by. I put my arms up like, "Hey." Keeps going. And in my head, I was like, dude, what are the chances of crossing paths with someone that many times? A couple days later, I got a message in a DM from her. I'm like, how the hell? Like, before I even answered, I hit my boy that we went to the show with. And I'm like, dude, that same girl we crossed paths with somehow ended up in my DM. It was fucking with me, to be honest with you. We end up talking, setting up to meet. We meet up for the first time. And we're talking, and she ends up telling me that she's in AA and is coming up on 2 years sober. In that moment, I go, all right, do I play it off like the average Joe, like I'm not in recovery, or an addict, I should say, because at this point I'm drinking? And I tell her, a few months back, I had 8.5 years. She's like, that's pretty alarming. That makes me nervous. And would you be willing to go back to meetings? And in my head, the way that she asked that meant, if I'm sober and going to meetings, we have a chance to date. Yes, I'll go back to meetings. She actually came back to one of my first meetings. I put together a few months. That was only a 6-month thing, but that was one of my times coming back. That relationship had ended, and one of my friends that I am in a graffiti crew with, he had overdosed at the same time. So it was an easy excuse to say, fuck this, I'm going back to drinking, and that's exactly what I did. And all in the time that this was going on, some of my really close friends that are, still clean to this day, and one of them is the owner of the treatment center and Rise Above and things like that, they stopped coming to the barbershop because they didn't, looking back, I was a little resentful in the moment, but it makes sense now when you connect the dots going backwards. They didn't want to see me getting high. And it was in and out. I had another stint coming back, and then, ultimately what finally got me back was the passing of a friend, and I ultimately stepped back in with the motivation because for me, knowing that recovery actually works, any of the times I had relapsed and was drinking and out there, it just, that mindset kicks in. Like, bro, this is not going to end well. And you already know that this ain't it. You've lived a good life. You know, you're not doing anything with purpose right now. You're spending all the money that you make literally on partying every night. That's not it. And I ultimately came back in 2016 after my friend passed, and my active addiction self said me versus everyone else. And my recovery, especially this time around, turned into me versus me. And it sounds stereotypical. You can see that in gyms. You can see it on fucking all kinds of motivational social medias. But the truth is, I like the odds of me versus me. Those are much better odds because I'm fucking the one putting the energy in. So I came back and it was tough, but it's like, what isn't tough in recovery, especially in the beginning, you know? And I just locked in and just started going back to doing what I know works.
You went back to meetings?
Right back.
Do you remember the first meeting that you had attended when you finally said, this needs to stop?
Yeah, it was the men's meeting. It's the meeting that, you know, my friend Greg, who is the one that passed, had been saying, you know, we miss you at that meeting. You know, we miss you at that meeting, Jay. And it would resonate with me because that's the men's meeting I was at for years, helped start it when I was in the halfway house before, when I had the 8.5 years. I came in with 1 day clean. I got a newcomer keychain, the white keychain, on a Tuesday. Greg's wake was on a Monday. I had gotten high that Tuesday. And I used to judge people. I say this a lot when I speak, but I feel the need to say it because I know I'm not the only one. But I used to judge people that would be high getting keychains. And I try not to do that no more, you know. And the reason why I say try is because we're not able to think what we want all the time, but you can act how you want. And with me, when you forward positive action can then change your thoughts, right? So I try not to judge people, but I got up, I was high, and I got a keychain. And the next day, which was November 9, 2016, was a Wednesday night, and I walked back into that men's meeting with 24 hours clean, cold turkey, sweating, crying, shared that I missed my friend, but also grateful that I was back because I told you I had lacked connection and acceptance and all these things. In that men's meeting, when I looked around, there was men that I knew, understood, and were also hurting from losing Greg. And he was a member of that home group. And in life, anything I've ever done that's extremely hard and fear-based and fucking nerve-wracking, on the other end is the best fucking results. So you got to lean into the hard shit. I know it's like, not to come off like a hard ass, but the truth is, man, if you fucking coddle people, man, they're going to be manipulative fucks. And I'm not trying to have people like that around me, so I don't want to do that to people. And I don't want to be that for others. So I lean into the hard shit. So I don't recommend fucking kicking cold turkey, but it's doable, and I share about it because that's how much recovery and the love of others and connection that I just toughed it out, man. And those next like week or two were really tough. And I was at a meeting back then, especially back then, almost every night. Didn't take any time off from the barbershop, so I'm cutting all day standing. Then I started fitting the gym in, right? Even though you're sick. Well, not sick. You're still withdrawing, kind of, right? It's not the same sick. It's more like being a pussy. If I'm being honest, I was mentally like, oh, I'm sore and tired. And I started going to the gym, right? Cutting hair, making those connections, back in meetings, raising my hand, except you're sharing differently now. Mm. You got to lean into just the truth. And the truth is, when we're newly coming back, that's actually fucking super inspiring. If you lean into your truth, it's going to inspire people. It's not always about having this witty delivery and time and profound shit. To me, the most profound stuff is the truth. So when people are going through stuff in life and they share it, you're going to, one, relieve it from yourself. But someone else needs to hear that.
Yes, I completely agree. I had very similar lived experience. When I first got locked up, I had snuck some Suboxones in the prison. So I was weaning myself off, but I needed to start running around the basketball court, sweating. You know, they say move a muscle, change a thought. You know, a tired dog's a good dog, right? A lot of these cliche terms that we hear, but I was like, no, I need to go to bed tired. I also need to sweat this out of my system. I need to get my blood flowing. I need to get my, natural endorphins back online, right? Where I'm not chasing chaos, but like chasing a good night of sleep. And when you talk about your experience of going back in that room, you were one of the types of guys that kept me in the rooms. I say that because I used to go up to guys that relapsed or took time off, checked out, and I would come back and ask them, like, what happened? I did it to all of them, 25-year Gary, like these guys, and what happened? And they say these small, subtle things, but these small, subtle things manifested and stacked until they were in the strip club one night and they made that decision to drink, right? And then some might argue there's no such thing as the phenomenon of craving or this or that, and we could dissect that. But the reality of it is when I put a substance in my body that I like, I fucking want that substance. It could be a type of Zyn, a type of Celsius, whatever it is. I'm fixated on getting what I want, and I want it 20 minutes ago. One thing I'd like to understand is you're getting into this routine of meetings, community, because Chris at this time had Rise Above. He was building it out, right?
Rise
and it's
Above
a very
and process recovery center.
Break that down. Because I know you have the sober houses, I know there's process, and I know that you guys have some detoxes. What is Rise Above, your involvement? Can you kind of lay out or paint a picture?
Yeah, so Rise Above is the housing and Process Recovery Center is the treatment.
Okay. But there's 20 houses. Like it's a
large, we have a huge community now in Nashua. And, it was started from an idea that Chris and some others had years ago. And I'll give a quick little background of it because it is a cool story. So Chris had gone on to be a professional hip hop dancer in our journey. One day he happened to be in the dance studio and heard these people talking about them opening up a methadone clinic in a town nearby and saying, we don't want those junkies in our town. His mindset was, wow, the same people that are saying you don't want junkies near you. Well, you have a old school junkie that bettered his life teaching your kids to dance. And that was where it planted for him. And, he's always been great with people and he's just very faith-based and very great with investing in other people. He's done it with me. I've done it with him. And he has a way with words. And him and some other friends at the time as a collective, there was a team of them. And, it started. And what I say, because some people go, how did it get to be this or grow to that? And when you truly invest in people and have a passion for recovery and helping people, that's the best business card.
You want to help a person, but you can't enable them. And when I've had friends that relapse, I feel as though when I hang out with them and they're active, that I am enabling them and letting them know that I think this is okay, or that in their mind they can justify, oh, well, fucking Benson D-Rock, he's fucking cool with this. And it's like, no, dude, I'm here because I love you and I care about you and I want nothing more than for you to stop right now. But I know sitting here and pounding the same idea that you already know is just going to make us hate each other, or for you not to be willing to extend a hand when you're finally open to doing it. So do you connect with Chris immediately, or do you guys ever not keep speaking, or kind of what's the design of getting sober again, rebuilding an identity that is yours, not just like purely recovery, but also reconnecting with guys that you love?
Part of the reconnection part was not everyone stopped coming to the barbershop, but certain people that I love and care about stopped. So their silence actually spoke volumes, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I had seen a bunch of guys at Greg's wake. So it was very gut-wrenching to wait in line to mourn your friend. But I also had seen friends and said, I'm coming back. So it's kind of an introduction to me coming back. And with 9 months clean, I get asked the question, hey, you ready? I was like, fucking ready for what? Ready for some shifts. That was my first introduction to starting to work in treatment, because all that time before, I never even thought to work in treatment or to do something in that avenue as a career. You know, I didn't.
Why?
I just didn't. It was just a pure, well, one, I was a barber, so that was my ways of making money. A little bit with art back then. You know, I'd do some salons and barbershops and shit. And then just once the sober living and the treatment center, and just, I already knew, if I'm being honest with you, with all that time I had before with sponsoring guys and being in recovery and speaking at workshops at conventions, and I honed my voice and how to lean into like speaking my truth and just being funny with recovery, right? Because that's a big part of life, funny. It doesn't have to be all about black and white and what the fucking text is. That shit's important, right? The literature's there for a reason. I'm just not always there to read. I'm going to be there to fucking interact and make people laugh. And then when I got asked that question and first step foot into now helping people, I realized, damn, I might be onto something. I just fucking locked in, and I went all in with the artwork, and I went all in with helping and working in treatment, and then all in my own personal recovery, right? Because those are two different things. You'll never hear me say I work in recovery. I work in treatment, and I'm an addict that's in recovery. And in order for me to be good at working in treatment, I'm fucking very, very relentless as far as like what I do to my body and how I speak and what I learn from. And, you know, whether it's the gym or eating or meetings still, I'll travel to do service. I'm not in a meeting every night. I more travel now to speak and engage or see people's celebrations and whatnot. You know, everyone's recovery looks different, but over the years, I'm here to expand my mind and just what I'm willing to learn from, and just to grow requires doing different things.
Why do you say that you work in treatment and create the difference from recovery?
Because me working in treatment, you are dealing with all kinds of different addictions and mental health, and some people really have never been open to maybe a 12-step approach. Maybe they've never given it a shot. There's a lot of mental health issues. I mean, if you ask me, most people, it's more mental health than it is substance abuse anyway. But hear me out on this. I have yet to meet anyone that had addiction issues, strip them of what they are using, and then we're just fucking perfect. If anything, we actually are more scared of our thoughts when you strip us of drugs and alcohol or whatever you used, right? And there are some more severe mental health, and we deal with that as well. But it's all humans that need some kind of care. And that's them in treatment. So we treat them with a clinical team, with case management, house managers, techs, right? Nursing, all these people. That is a team of people that is helping someone in treatment. And yes, my favorite part, and I say my favorite title with doing that, is that I'm also an addict, because I get to then be, you know, raw and compassionate and caring in approach with my personal recovery journey.
100%. It makes complete sense. When you had talked about your relapse, coming back, then you move, you, in a way, have to create a new identity in certain regards. And it makes me reflect on when I've heard you speak about your childhood and moving around and reestablishing your identity. Do you think that you were ever fearful in recovery of creating a new identity or losing that identity?
Solid question. I equate that to, I have some friends that relapse with similar time. One, I think, had a year or so more. They've never been able to come back and gain significant amount of time. And I don't think I've actually ever been asked that question, but it does bring up a topic that me and some of my friends have spoken with. And if it wasn't for me willing to go at my ego, meaning the night that I got the white keychain, there was some people in the room that I remember introducing to NA, being that vessel of hope, maybe that first hug, whatever it is. But the ego was like, you showed these. No, dude, you just led the way in a sense that someone showed you, right? And it's ego. And this is what I'm extremely grateful for, because this is what I think, and it makes me understand why some people I know that have had time have never been able to come back. their sole identity was the guy that had time sponsoring people. My identity at a young age was more of like a graffiti writer, the barber, you know what I'm saying? Like I already had some skill sets and some things I was, right? I was the active barber in the city, and then I was Jay, the recovering addict barber, where people could go to the barber shop and hang out. And if you were fucking fresh out of jail, I'd cut your hair. If you were fresh in a halfway house, you could come there and they'd know I'd get them lunch and be like, I'd joke with them and go, you know how you pay for this haircut? You come to the meeting tonight. And I was that guy. So yes, I relapsed, and I say this because hopefully someone out there that has time that's battling with that, I can't stress this enough. You can't fuck up your truth. So I had to start leaning into, dude, I started to be mad unspiritual. I started not doing all the things that got me these things. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped really trying to create and put my eye on something with Streetsmart, and just, big goals will have you chasing something and becoming someone along the way. That's like what recovery has shown me. And I was grateful that, yes, I had one fucking day and I'm coming back. Right? But I just ran to my truth, and I was like, you still have all these skill sets that you've worked on, dude. That's your identity. I'm J-Mac. I'm a fucking Pisces, bro. I'm a bag of emotions that can come off as a hot ass sometimes, but I'll openly tell you on this platform or any other, it was just growing up, you learn how to defend yourself a certain way. But I'm telling you wholeheartedly, I'm more emotional and rather be creative and caring. You know what I mean? But I can definitely be the opposite if you fuck with that. But I think that's just more because I rather lead with love, and then some people fuck that over, but we're all emotional. It's just some carry it well, and that's just my opinion.
I'm with you 100%. I think we are very emotional, irrational to some degree creatures. I won't get too deep on biological references, but I truly believe that with conviction. In fact, if we go back to the polarization, some of the toughest, most quiet, stonewalling type of men or women are actually the most emotional creatures that I've ever met. It's just, this is an exterior, this is a facade. And it's not to say that it's fake, but you need to penetrate a little deeper to get to the core. And once you get to the core, you realize, wow, there's a lot to unpack here. I call it peeling back the onion, right? Peeling back the onion. How did you start peeling back the onion in your own life once you found yourself back in recovery? The reason I ask this is because a lot of people get to a certain point where I feel like they get comfortable. So how do you today still peel back the onion and see the core of J-Mac and what you're dealing with?
I can answer that pretty simply. I still go at, no matter how much time I have, even though now I've surpassed, because this journey's been part of the ego, the guilt and shame was like when I got the first year, I was like, yeah, but I don't have 8.5. When I got 2, it was great, but I don't have it's been that. And I remember finally coming up to match that time, which was a year ago. Holy shit, you've now, and now it's leaning into the same shit that I talk to others about. Set goals that scare you.
17 years roughly in recovery.
Yeah, I just don't get to put them together. They're spaced out. I joke with people and say addict math, right? And I do this, and this is where I own, and this is the comedy piece. I definitely write, not actually down jokes, but we have dark humor. I've yet to meet an addict that really is in recovery. You know what I mean? That just doesn't have.
We joke about things that are pretty fucked up.
Yeah, I know I can send something, and I'm like, they're probably gonna fucking belly laugh. Whereas if I said that a regular family reunion, I might be like, what the fuck? Is that, sometimes I'll joke with people because they'll go, I got 10 years off heroin. I haven't drank since 2015. And when they're done, I go, so you have 2 days clean. And they're like, what the fuck, dude? Because they just spent 5 minutes. This happens a lot with clients. But it's a way to break the ice. And they usually laugh at that joke because they're trying to justify, right? And I'll joke. And so I lean into that and say, anyone had a significant amount of time, relapse, and now that you've been back, you play this game when that certain day comes up, damn, I would have 19 years. And I watch sometimes people's faces glow. And they're relating. It's funny because this thing, has the light bulb, but you see it them light up and they're like, holy shit, I've been doing that. And I go, me too. Most addicts in recovery, Most, not all. Most have experience with relapsing. And if anyone's listening that's new and holding their seat and I've never relapsed, great. It's fucking doable. I'm not even trying to speak in a way that that's not doable. I'm just saying you're in uncharted territory. You know, so it is doable. I know people that got clean off one shot, but they had 20 years experience using, which was enough good information to look at that I don't want to go that way no more. It's just I lean into that. Yes, I did relapse. And yes, I almost didn't make it back. And yes, I was resentful towards 12-step fellowship. And yes, I was on some fuck them, fuck that. And that's really just a negative mindset that was literally rupturing my whole being. But I didn't see it at the time as that. It was literally on some fuck everyone shit.
I understand. You know, I have 11 years now, and I've had to really realign my perspective on that because, yes, it's great. I'm happy. But also I know that recovery is a way of life and that I'm not immune to my addict tendencies because, in fact, I've had to address addict-like mindsets in recovery. But you know, the 7 years leading up to it, I relapsed every single day, you know, it was every day. And it was a full-time job. You know, one of the things I'd love to touch on is with your recovery time now, with your experience, what is one thing that really bothers you in the treatment sphere?
Treatment sphere or just as an overall trying to help addicts?
I would say the treatment sphere. I would say the one thing that you consistently hear or see in treatment facilities that kind of gets under your skin based on your previous experience and all of the relationships.
I'd say when it starts to be pretty apparent if people are taking an angle where it's more about money and the maneuvers and the things come from a lack of experience or compassion, and it's a fucking number, not only for your pocket, but for the digits on the screen. And it's why I'll speak so openly, whether it's group or with people or even the people I work with. No, I have no desire to do certain things, and some people are better at things than I am. I know, or I should say, I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and I own that. And what I am 100% good at, because the fucking Google reviews will say it, you can go in some and see some specifically, and you know, they can follow me up on that. I'm not just throwing shit out there. Client care and really giving a fuck for people, dude, is literally the best business card. And if you lead with that, it speaks for itself. But not everyone out there in the world is looking to do that. And when that stuff gets exposed, that's the shit that irks me, you know. That, and then I guess the bashing of meetings or a specific 12-step fellowship, or because that happens too.
Mm-hmm.
And I see people trying to run stuff in like this, like, I don't know, just this weird, like holistic way, like a weird angle where I'm like, okay, what the fuck does that look like then? How are we helping people? Because I'm a real ass addict, so I can't substitute and go this angle. Do you know what I mean? I just can't do that. And I just,
do you think you can't do it, or is it?
Meaning I've seen people, more West Coast stuff I've heard, but just almost getting into like microdosing and just these weird topics where I'm like, bro, to me that just seems like a weird way that you're justifying a relapse without calling it a relapse and taking this weird angle and packaging it up into some shit. And I'm not with that. Because like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel here, and recovery actually works.
And that's abstaining from like mind and mood altering things, primarily drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. Like when you hear these terms like Cali sober, or now I just heard this other thing for the first time the other day, like Miami sober or something, and it's people doing hard drugs, but not alcohol and weed. Or I was just like, I kind of tune out when I hear this shit. And I guess that's where the old school mentality comes in. Like whether it's AA, NA, there's CA, there's HA, I was just in Maryland and found out what CDA is now. And I met some of the most amazing fucking people I've ever met in my life that, you know, 35 years, 40 years, couple guys, 43 years. And it opened my mind. You know, I was down there to speak for a convention and I said, I'm Jay, I'm an addict. You know, I say I'm an addict. It covers everything. I don't say I'm an addict and alcoholic. That's like saying I'm a German Shepherd dog. And they fucking died laughing, which I just felt relieved. And to the point where the next morning, the closing meeting, the person that was coming up to do the readings went up to the mic and says, Hey, I'm Bucky. I'm a German Shepherd dog. In the fucking place, dude, I was like, I feel at home. You know, it was this great feeling. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is, you know, you said some things I don't like. And a whole fellowship was started down there off of a bunch of shit that some people didn't like. And it's been going on for 40 years. And I met some of the most caring people that had time that's close to my age.
You bring up 2 points that stick out in my mind. I will literally poke and prod at people who have particular convictions. Whether that is the 12-step community is the only way that things work, because you have SA, GA, CA, HA, NA, AA. I mean,
Dharma, Smart Recovery, Al-Anon. There's a few other things. Some people I know do mainly yoga or church or whatever.
I did for a little while. I was going to Refuge, and then people there were like, "Yeah, oh, well, he's the founder and his sex thing," and I'm like, "Listen, all I know is what's written in this literature is helping me today, and it's another layer to my recovery. So I'm not going to focus on that lens. Yeah, maybe that guy's not a good guy, or what, I don't know what he's dealing with. I don't even know the situation, but I know the situation in this book is it's helping me and you're helping me. So if we get caught in this shit, then we split apart. We're not together. And I know that community is really the only way I could get sober. I never, ever met someone that got sober on an island by themselves.
Same.
Never. Right. And so, touching on that community aspect, I've heard people talk about, the data based on general services they put out shows that AA hasn't grown. And I'm like, well, there also weren't like 20 other 12-step communities. There weren't all these other exploratory, processes in recovery that exist. So I would argue that whether it started with the Washingtonians before AA, or if we look at AA through 1936 and we fast forward till now, like, we're early in this game of self-exploration. We're early in this game of like investing in our recovery, right? Or investing in our sobriety. We're early in this game of understanding the mental, physical, and spiritual aspects that are affected within us that cause us to seek refuge in drinking and drugging and living in that chaos. So like, let's dial it back, right? And let's try to be objective and just understand that what we're doing now works. On the flip side, I see people that are very entrenched in 12-step communities and they don't keep an open mind to other ways because they're fear-based. And that fear is really, well, this is what works for me. I'm not going on that fucking other train. Fuck that other train. This is my community. No, I don't want anything to do with it. And part of this podcast, Investing in Sobriety, is to dive deeper into like what they're ultimately experiencing in this community, because I truly believe this is an experiment. I truly believe that there are more things that we all have in common than difference. And I don't know, time will tell.
Well, that's why diversity is the biggest strength. I say it, I'll give you paint a quick little visual. I could be running a group where there's anyone from a middle-aged black guy, young white kid, transgender, secretly gay, openly gay, Spanish, teenager, sometimes young as 18, 19, and then maybe a guy that's approaching 60. So I just painted a picture, right? And that could be one group. And what I try to do is I address the elephant in the room, and sometimes even specific substances. If you say diversity, our biggest strength, and you'll see people because they're kind of on edge. They don't know how to react. So I try to go at that and say, I'll ask a specific question. Where's my drunks? Maybe 8 people raise their hand here, right? They like alcohol. Well, that's their DOC.
Drug of choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's my meth heads, right? And I can use slang and whatever. So all these different hands go up, right? And this is just my experience. I've watched a lot of alcoholics over the years maybe come in outside world. They might actually look pretty successful, couple degrees maybe. And they'll admit, I don't feel like I need rehab. I mean, this kid's in here for shooting dope. He just came from Valley Street. He's been in jail or was homeless. I'm driving home in my own car. Cool. Do you know that your drug of choice, if you try kicking on your own in your living room, you can die? Some already know that, but some are like, and you're like, okay. So this kid over here, it's obvious that he's a junkie, right? He uses needles. That's what we call him, or at least when I was growing up. So he's different, right? And they're like, oh. And I was like, and then there's someone that's maybe transgender and they might be confused or they don't feel accepted but when you lean into the similarities that everyone has, right? And this happened recently. You have people almost ultimately admitting through the way that they speak, yes, I was very judgmental. And I might have thought different of this person, but then I let them share. Not let them share. I listened why they shared. And I teared up for someone I was judging. Or this one, I judge them off of a specific substance. And what I say earlier, it's the only disease I told you we can look at someone else and go, they're worse than me. And by knowing that they're worse than me or saying that, my brain says that allows me to drink more. So I dissect all these things. And ultimately, the goal of that is to not single people out, but it's to do what you just said. We have more in common. So I always say this, and I say it in a joking way. I don't give a fuck who you pray to, who you voted for, or who you fuck. And when they say the last part, they're kind of like, Jesus. And I joke with them because I want whoever's in the room that's maybe trans or gay or whatever to just fucking feel accepted, because what I'm really there to help them with if they're in treatment is to get better and have an understanding. I truly don't, and that also comes from the barber in me. I don't care about politics and religion and stuff like that, because those are two topics that'll have two people at each other's throat. But when you strip it down to the emotional core of like why we're suffering and what's actually wrong with you, you'll start listening and open up to someone usually that you might have judged at the beginning of that group.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing is, you talk about religion or politics, right? And you'll have two people at each other's throat. And sometimes I feel like the recovery community is at each other's throats in the same way. And it's like any time that you have such a strong conviction about something that you don't know, you have to have like an internal locus of control and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my perspective isn't right. I only know what I know, but I know what's worked for me. And this isn't an absolute truth. It's just my truth, right? And I don't become married to that idea that this is my absolute truth. This is the one way. I say, this is what's worked for me. And I have been shown the results of that through lived experience. And so the only way I can kind of keep this is by giving it away, right? To continue to build community. Last night, I went to a meeting. I haven't been going to a lot of meetings. I've been outside the country. Honestly, it's an excuse. It's a good excuse, but I'm very close with a lot of the guys. I'm going back through the book right now. I haven't done it in years. I haven't sponsored anyone in years. And I'm going through the book with a guy that thinks very differently than me on the surface. When I first met this guy, I was in Connecticut Valley Hospital. Then we randomly ended up at a trip together in Medellin because we have same friends in the recovery community. And he was very rigid and regimented. And I was wondering why that bothered me so much. Now, to get to the point, I've understood why it bothered me. And to check my ego, just like you did when you went up and got your keychain, just like you've done numerous times, I realized that this guy has something that could teach me more about myself. And if he's open, we can actually dive deeper and probably have a very enriching, friends dynamic, I can't hold people in contempt. I hear sometimes in recovery, individuals will say, oh, well, that person doesn't have anything I want. They can't be my sponsor. Or outside of the 12-step community, they're not doing what we do. Like, they're not right. And at the end of the day, I think that's a really bad mental place to think from, because we can learn something from everyone. Yeah. A homeless guy, no money, like that guy has a story, man.
And sometimes what you're learning is that you don't want to be anything like that. And that's just the truth, right? So here's the truth of what I've just gathered recently over time. And I'm really on this kind of like unapologetic like era, bro. I'm 46 years old. I've been doing the things I'm really interested in for like a good chunk of my life.
Yep.
And not everyone's on the same course or driven by the same things. And that's fine. That actually helps you find your people. But I've been saying this for a while, and it's just really true. Like, the most judgmental people on the planet are in like churches and meetings, in my experience. But some of the most loving and compassionate people are in the same places. So to me, recovery is the evolution of self that we do with others. The tricky part is finding the others, right? We said every relationship's a gamble. Well, you're gambling to find the others. How do you fucking get vulnerable and share your truth and share your stuff to find some other people? Because some are looking, they're going to hear you and be like, I don't fuck with him. That's fine. Fuck him. It's the people that do.
You know, the one thing I want to hit you with is you're a father. You're an artist. You're a recovery advocate. You're involved in a 12-step community. You work in treatment. You're a brother. You're a son. You're all these things that are really important. How do you balance that now and keep yourself in check and stay on the trajectory of living in recovery?
It's the balance that I've created. The younger version of me used to say, and it comes my way a lot, man, I'm struggling with finding balance. I'm struggling with finding balance, right? Client goes to sober living, they last a month, boom. Oh, I went all in on this relationship. Oh, so you went all in on this girl that you just met, or guy, whatever, because I've dealt with the females too. You went all in on a bunch of shit. That ultimately be your sole purpose on how you were operating that day, whether they were making you feel good and whether you were making this kind of money, right? I've gone that route too. So there's like non-negotiables. Every day, God willing, long as I'm not traveling for art, most mornings, I eat the same thing. It's weighed. I go to the gym, do different body parts, some cardio, right? I have my days I run group. So now I'm of service to them. That's my job. Maybe in the studio, planning, making calls with people. If I'm not doing a job that's going to generate money for art, I still try to stay in a creative state somewhat. Sometimes I have little lulls, because the bottom line is, whether I make a cent ever again in the rest of my life, just say right now as I speak, I never made money from art. I'm still going to create, and I'm still going to do that. And if for some reason the treatment center and sober living was non-existent from right now, I'm still going to be a recovering addict. I'm still going to do the things I know that work, right? It's just now I've built a career doing two things I'm deeply passionate about. And to keep those afloat, I still have to do the things that I deeply was interested in before it was a career. And then on the end of being a dad, I have to continue. And it's really not hard for me to do that, because I'm really driven by caring to do that, right? Be a significant other. Be encouraging. I fucking motivate my girl. I'm grateful to be in that position. I never seen like a role model doing that growing up, but as a fucking man, it gives you great purpose to handle shit. Be the protector, be the provider, be the wisdom, be the insight, be the humor, be the passionate when needed, be the physically passionate when needed, right? All these different things are needed, and it feels nice to have all these things stacked on your shoulders sometimes, even though if it gets overwhelming. To keep that going, who the fuck am I to shit on the blessings I once prayed for? So I used to be resentful towards God, and then I had to be like, break it down. Yo, it's weird, bro, because anytime I was in life, in a pinch where it was literally not up to me anymore, I find myself doing all these things I remembered from Sunday school. Our Father who art in heaven. Oh, that's weird. Why? Because I found myself in this predicament where I knew that I didn't have the fucking power to do it, so I looked for someone else. That's what started making me look that, when we're in a jam.
That foxhole prayer.
And I once, especially when the second cruiser would pull up, back in the day, the second cruiser pulls up and he's putting his gloves on, you're like, oh, fuck. Praying to get out, at least to have there be bail.
Just one, it'll be different.
Please, I have $40 cash. I need at least bail, right? Just all those things. A lot of the stuff, most of what is in my life now and what it looks like, I once prayed for. I want to paint. I want to create in this world. I'd love to help addicts. Because it's all stuff I knew that I had put all this time in and became good at. We know when we're good at something, especially if other people tell you, well, they like your style of things. And I prayed for all these things, to be a dad, to have peace and harmony. When you go home, that's a safe space. Like I'm always on the road and doing stuff. And I love if I can make it home in a reasonable time where that's like the downtime. Even if I had the most fulfilling day, long as it ends with going home, whether it's tubby time or putting him to bed and then our downtime to watch TV and talk about the day or whatever it is, right? That's all very peaceful and complete opposite of the way I grew up. So peace and harmony takes effort. Going with non-negotiables. I don't always want to work out, believe it or not. Some people just think I'm this fucking like 5 a.m. drink pre-workout, love the gym. I love the benefits of the gym. I love the results of the gym, but sometimes I'm fucking bitching and sometimes I have this pussy-ass workout. If I'm being honest, just some days you're just not as strong. But it's better than rolling over and not going to the gym. I'm more regimented now with eating better and weighing food and results and seeing you get toned. And it's like, set goals that scare you. It's what I say in group and it's what I say in life. The last couple of years, my goal was, You know, I wanted to get engaged. Never thought I'd ever say that. That happened. Wanted to buy a house. That happened. Wanted to start doing murals, and I set certain specific numbers in my head that seemed fucking nuts. To do a canvas this size 6-7 years ago and get $400 or $500 was a big deal. Now I set these expectations, right? To manifest something, you gotta speak it into existence, but you don't just say it and hope it happens. You say it and do the work. And then I started being able to do murals that, like, I once set a figure and some people were like, that's fucking outrageous. I don't think that happened. I'm like, that's fine. I'm going to make it happen. And I did. And then it was to eat better. And then it was to speak more nationally and travel and do podcasts, do service. Next thing you know, I do a podcast. A guy reaches out to me. Next thing you know, they're taking care of the whole trip and flying down to Maryland. And, you know, shout out to Frank and all those guys I met down there. So it's all stuff I spoke into existence. So who am I to fucking then lay off the gas? I already know what the fuck happens when you do that. You know, you can have all these great things in your life and then step off the gas because ego will come in and go, I did all this. Nah, man, so many people helped me to get to where I'm at today, you know, and leaning into like the positive voice. Because what you just said, it's like a neighborhood that's scary to go in, right? I've never gotten out of this space ever in life. And you're never going to get out of there. It's just making the narrative more enjoyable to listen to. And that takes work. I don't outthink my fucking negative thinking by just clicking positive. I usually have to do tough shit. Stuff that's like, bro, you're a bitch. Like I want to do cardio and I'm sweating and my head's like literally like, we should stop. But guess what? I do 30 minutes. I'm dripping sweat. I feel better. I go home, eat a good meal, shower, get dressed, go to the center, speak to someone that's battling with mental health or that doesn't know that's the stuff that we're passionately talking about, right? Because we know that it works. There's some people out there that don't know it works. And God blessed me with this other gift. I just think it's a gift that when someone is combative or doesn't think it works, but I know that their life shows otherwise, like meaning that they need this help, I take it as a personal challenge to how can I help this person understand that recovery is not only possible, but fucking so badass. Because when you get someone lock in on you versus you, they just blossom into these amazing humans.
100%.
And I know that works. So I'm going to speak with you with conviction and passion to the point where sometimes they might be like, this guy's full of himself, or he thinks he's, and they'll say this, so it's not like I'm making it up.
Yeah.
When I first met you, I thought you were an asshole, or full of yourself, and they would say, and I'll
You're saying
smirk.
that to me?
No, I'm saying
No, because people say that about me too. Sorry. Yeah.
So I relate with them. Sometimes hug them, and I'm like, I really appreciate you saying that, because the younger version of me would probably be so bothered that you were telling me that you thought I was an asshole. But when you're trying to combat someone's thinking and you know that it works, you're okay with being viewed like that. That actually makes the most sense. Why would me leaning into my truth not ruffle your feathers? You've been full of shit your whole life. And why can I say it like that? Because I was full of shit my whole life. I was talking about a bunch of fucking shit that didn't matter. I was worrying about being a street kid. Oh, I caught this case. I did this one. I know that one. This one's upstate. All this shit. I personally don't give a fuck about none of that stuff. That's the whole bragging backwards part. So even though we started with it, it's more like segueing towards the end. I want to know what you're doing or some cool shit that happened this week. Not in the mid-90s or early 2000s. What's the most badass thing you did? And I try to shut that down with certain friends I know that they're always constantly talking about what happened there. And it's like, no, are we being a dad? Are we progressing? Are you living in better shape now mentally? Are you helping people? Like brag that way, you know, and you got to hang around with people that are also doing stuff like that, because then it does sound like you're bragging. Whereas if you're doing some cool shit and I'm doing some cool shit, we're really just sharing our lives with each other. That's not bragging.
I completely agree. J-Mac, it was an absolute pleasure to sit down with you. Thank you for joining us. You dropped a lot of wisdom, experience, hope. For those of you that want to check out J-Mac's page, his artwork is absolutely phenomenal. I wouldn't just say that if I didn't like it and if it wasn't good. For those of you that know me, you can co-sign that. We are going to put his Instagram tag in the bio. Also, we're going to plug Rise Above and Process Recovery. If you're looking for help, reach out to J-Mac. He can help facilitate introductions regarding recovery and treatment-based facilities. J-Mac, brother, thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your story with me. It's another day that I get to enrich my recovery through you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It meant a lot. Thank you.